Good evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order. I would like to welcome the New Vision Leadership Group. We appreciate y'all coming out this evening.
Most of us know Joel pretty well, but anyhow, just to make sure that we do, he's from Lafayette, obviously mayor, president. Joel Robideaux was elected in October 2015 and officially took office on January the 4th, 2016. We appreciate you being with us this evening. Thanks a lot, Mayor.
All right, that was the most comprehensive introduction I think I could have asked for. Any questions? I don't know what else. Hey, I remember coming here, I think it would have been 2003 or early 2004 is when I very first ran for office. This was the first forum that I attended, and I can remember being nervous and I studied up. I was running for the legislature, the state legislature at the time, and I remember looking at the budget and legislation that you know had passed, and roads and drainage and all those kinds of issues, and then so I came up and gave my talk, and I think there was, I don't remember how many of us were running, and so everybody kind of had their opportunity to give the talk, and then it was time for questions and answers. And when I got up, when it was my turn for a question, they asked me how I was going to vote on cockfighting, if I was going to vote to repeal it or not. And I was the one question from left field that I didn't anticipate at all. And it was a good life lesson to say, you can study all you want, you don't ever know what the question is going to be. So you just soon be honest, and that's what people appreciate more than having the right answer. But I appreciate the invite. I've always enjoyed the times that I've come. It's such a well-informed group, and to see the group of young folks here is really, really impressive. So thank y'all for coming, because ultimately you guys are going to be the leaders of this community, and so it's important that y'all understand that at an early age. Somebody has to do it, and it just soon be you guys, and the fact that you're here tells me that in all likelihood y'all are going to be the next leaders of this community. So thank you for coming. A lot of stuff happened since I took office January 4th. Carol hit on some of it. Of course, the flood kind of took over the last couple of months as it relates to what my day-to-day activities been. And so I'll go through whatever I think y'all may want to hear about, but really at the end, any questions that you want to ask, even if it's about cockfighting. We did vote that out, by the way, and I think we were the second to last state to do so when we did it in 2006, I think is when it happened. New Mexico was behind us. But any questions that you have, if I leave it out, it's not because I don't want to talk about it, it's just I probably forgot. So, so certainly any questions are welcome. Let me talk about the flood, just because it's kind of the newest and freshest thing on everybody's mind, and I can kind of let everybody know where we are as it relates to the flood. Certainly, it was an event that no one could have anticipated. I know we met on Thursday night on everything but the rainfall, really, and got to work on Friday, and the rains were coming down, and you know we've had hard rains before, and so there still was nothing out of the ordinary. We did go that afternoon on Friday to the emergency operations, just because the forecast looked like it was going to continue on. And so being a new administration, the sheriff was new, and so for all of us that we're going to have to make, you know, emergency declarations and decisions, if it got to that point, we went and had a good visit, and they explained to us the whole procedures of emergency declarations and what needs to happen if you know that if it gets to that point. So even Friday, you know, late morning, early afternoon, we still, you know, were not aware that the rain was going to continue falling, and then, you know, I leave my phone in the car when I have speaking engagements, but I can remember I was getting text, 11 inches, 12, 16, and then in the afternoon it got to 18, and then to 20, and then come Saturday, we were up in 26 inches of rain in the rain barrels that we have stationed, around town, and so we knew late Friday that the forecast was not changing, that it was stalled over us, and that the rain was going to continue through the night and some on Saturday. And we had some areas that had 30 inches of rain, which is just really inconceivable. I don't know how familiar all of y'all may or may not be about the Vermilion, but when all the drainage and all the coulees are pouring into the Vermilion, what happens is it starts to flow backwards. And that's what happened here. It happens with much less water, but now the current, the backward current of the Vermilion is what caused a lot of the problems that you just couldn't predict, because it was going all the way back up into St. Martin Parish, and a lot of St. Martin Parish flooding came from the fact that that the Vermilion River was going backwards and back into St. Martin Parish. And so there were a lot of unforeseen problems. So once we got through the emergency response, and I think ended up being over 1,700 calls to 911 for rescues, and that happened, pretty much all Friday night it started, and then Saturday and Sunday, and so you kind of get through that phase. And to be honest with you, that's kind of a blur. I just know we were all at the Emergency Operations Center, just getting reports in from the sheriffs and from the firefighters and from the city police, and until the calls finally started to seem to settle down. That's when we had to figure out, okay, we need to open a shelter. Where's the shelter going to be? How many people are going to come? And so you kind of go through that that emergency response phase, and then once that's all settled in, you try to operate it. And we had good partners, and obviously the faith-based community was incredible, feeding folks, at the shelter, and then actually going into the neighborhoods and doing the work that needed to be done, and feeding the first responders and the folks that were out there. And so that process continued on for weeks, and then finally, we were at the point now where we're in the recovery phase, and so we're hopeful that the federal government will live up to its commitment to help, because there's homeowners now that just don't really have the information that they need to make decisions about what they're going to do with their house. A lot of the houses still had significant mortgages on them, and so you've got young families that owe a lot to the bank for their house. So it's not like they can go borrow more money to fix it, and it may be $40,000, and FEMA may have given them $8,000, $10,000, but that means they're still short a significant amount of money. And we're hopeful that the federal government will send the money down, right? And then so they've appropriated some of it, and so now that that's going to happen, we're tasked with figuring out what's the best use of that money. And I could talk to any number of groups, and some of them are going to say drainage. You need to go and start looking at the watersheds, and let's spend that money, because it's millions of dollars, and let's fix the drainage. There's some that are going to say it needs to go to these homeowners that need to get back into their home, and are short the amount of money that they need to get back in, because if they can't get back in to their houses, we don't know where they're going to end up. Those houses will end up sitting, and so the whole economy will be affected by the fact that we weren't able to get those folks back in the houses. And then the truth probably is that it's going to be, some allocation between different things. But you run the risk of spreading it too thin and not really fixing the drainage, and not really being enough to help the homeowners try to get back into their house. And I use the phrase homeowners, it could be renters, but the folks to get back in their homes. And so it's not an easy decision to make on how much to spend and where to spend it. It really is going to depend, but in whichever way we go, it won't be enough to fix all of the drainage issues, and it won't be enough to make everyone whole. Congress just isn't going to send us that much money. And so hopefully we'll strike a balance that makes sense for the majority of people in Lafayette Parish. And then the problem actually is even a little bit bigger than that. Because I could spend what Lafayette Parish gets allocated, and I could fix all of our drainage, and fix the Ildecon, and fix Coulee Mean, and whatever other drainage issues we may have. But from a state perspective and from the federal government's perspective, they would say, well, you fixed it, but it's all flooding neighborhoods in Vermilion Parish now, because the Vermilion ultimately empties into Vermilion Bay. So the more water I'm able to pour in there and get it out of Lafayette, I've just caused the Vermilion downstream to swell. So anything that we do has to be done in conjunction with our neighbors. And the one thing that the flood has taught us is that we look at maps. I don't know if y'all like me, but I love to look at maps. But if you look at maps, you know, there's the lines that define where we live and who we are. But the flood doesn't care about that. And so, you know, our task is to go in and erase all of those lines and look at the Vermilion River and look at the watershed and say, what do we need to fix to get the water into the Vermilion Bay the best way possible to cause the least amount of effect on the people that live along the Vermilion River, and not care where Lafayette starts and Lafayette ends and St. Martin ends and Vermilion Parish starts. And so it'll be a concerted effort with all of us to try to figure this out. At the same time, though, keeping in mind that there's real people that are trying to make incredibly difficult decisions as we speak tonight about, am I going to be able to get back in this house and when? And that to me is probably the most important role that we can play as it relates to what money is going to come from the federal government. If I left anything out about the flood, certainly ask me during the question and answer period. I know in the initial contact that was made with the office, they asked me to talk about the police chief, so I'll kind of talk about where we are with picking a new chief of police for Lafayette, for the city of Lafayette. So as was mentioned in the introduction, right after taking office, Chief Kraft, you know, let me know that he was going to go ahead and take retirement. He had the number of years that he could go ahead and retire, and so we started the process of figuring out, you know, what the next steps were. So the next step was to appoint an interim chief of police, and the law allows for that to be on 90 days. And I appointed a gentleman by the name of Reginald Thomas. Reggie had been with the force for a while, incredibly talented individual and a great police officer. I think at the time he was exactly what we needed in Lafayette, and he's done an unbelievable job. And it kills me that he cannot be the permanent chief of police, and I'll go through that with y'all here tonight and the reasons why. And that's not to say that my position is the correct position, because there's different schools of thought, and I'll explain to you that what I'm talking about. So the interim chief I can appoint for 90 days, and then I have to go before the Civil Service Board for Fire and Police to ask for an extension, and to ask for an extension as we go through the process of trying to find a permanent chief of police. Before I took office, in the previous administration, there was a change that had been made to the qualifications to be Lafayette's chief of police. Every municipality has its own requirements. Lafayette changed it to read that you either had to have 10 years of experience and a college degree, or have been on the force since 1979. At the time, there was only 2 individuals that had been on the force since 1979, and so the choice was who would apply out of that. But there was 2 individuals that could apply from within that didn't have a college degree, and then the other ones that could apply had to have the college degree and 10 years of experience. Well, that was done in 2003, maybe 4. So now, here we are 12 years later, so at some point, the qualifications meant that the chief of police was either going to have a college degree in 10 years or be 90 years old. Because if you're on the force since 1979, you know, it's just, there was no one that fit that piece of the criteria anymore. So the only criteria was college degree with 10 years. The issue for me was that 10 years of experience is fairly new to the police force. In fact, in Lafayette, in our city police, you don't make sergeant until 12 years. So you're talking about a patrolman with 10 years of experience and a college degree could apply for the chief of police. But for those of you that don't know the rankings, you have your majors, you have captains, you have lieutenants, and it goes down from there, okay? So if I have any majors that have been on the force for 20-something years and in supervisory position, if I have lieutenants and captains that have been on the force for 20 years with supervisory positions, but they didn't have their degree, they couldn't even apply for the job. Don't even think about it, because they hadn't been in since 1979. And so we were left with, I could have 10 years, and the 10 years didn't require any supervisory experience. So I literally could have a motorcycle policeman, nothing again, everybody goes through that part of their career, from New Iberia that had a college degree that could apply for my chief of police position, and I had all of these qualified long-term officers that have been in supervisory positions that couldn't even apply. The argument became, well, should the chief of police be required to have a degree or not? So I looked at every comparable municipality in the state of Louisiana and outside the state of Louisiana, and I found a couple of really interesting things. One, Lafayette City Police was the only police force that, in addition to years of service, to improve in rank, to go from sergeant to lieutenant to captain to major, in addition to having to satisfy those number of years in service, you had to have a certain level of educational attainment. So for instance, if you were ever going to be a major, you had to have at least 69 hours or an associate's degree to become the rank of major in Lafayette City Police. That existed nowhere else. But Lafayette had that, and you had to have whatever, 50-something or 40-something to be a captain, and so much for a lieutenant, and so much. So there was a 2-tier requirement to make your way through Lafayette City Police. You could be there 40 years and have longer tenure than anyone else, but you wouldn't be at the rank of major. There would be people ranked higher than you if you didn't get the educational requirement. So Lafayette was already a very strict educational component police force. And then what most other municipalities had, and I'm not here as a proponent to say, hey, if everyone else does it, then it must be good. I'm okay with let's be unique and let's do it our own way, which with the educational requirements we did. So I asked the Civil Service Board to change the requirements, to get rid of the 1979 deal, because that basically didn't factor in anymore. And I said, look, can we do something similar to what all the other municipalities do? Shreveport, Baton Rouge, Lake Charles, Monroe, New Orleans, Alexandria, and let's do a 2- or 3-tier system. If you have a college degree, that's okay, and I said I want you to at least have 12 years, because our city police have 12 years before they're a sergeant, so to have any supervisory experience, you need to have that. So it was a degree with 12 years and 2 years of supervisory experience. So I said, that's if you have the degree. If you don't have the degree, but you have the 60 hours of college, then you need to have 20 years of experience, and you need to have 5 years of supervisory experience. And if you didn't have the 60 hours, but you had the 40 hours, meaning you're in the lieutenant range, then you had to have 25 years, and you had to have 10 years of supervisory experience. And so it was a tiered system, much stricter than any other municipality in the state, because none of them had the educational requirement. It was just, you have this many years with this much supervisory, you can apply. Or if you have, you know, more years than that, you could have less supervisory, and then if you had a degree, you could do that. So ours, I felt like I presented a fairly good proposal to get the best pool of candidates that could apply. And then I could make the decision. Well, Civil Service Board said, no, we don't want that, we want it to be the degree. You gotta have the degree. And so I was like, well, that's fine, but you still have to change it, because it's the degree with 10 years with no supervisory experience. It just doesn't make any sense at all that I'm gonna have to muddle through candidates that have never supervised anybody in their life, and they're not only gonna supervise, they're gonna be the head of a 200-something man department. So they were contemplating that, and then it came to the meeting time, and they said, oh, you know what, we're just going to keep it like it is. So now, 10 years with a degree, and 1979 is what we have, which to me is an embarrassment if you look at what every other community has as their requirements. And so but I mean, they make the determination, so we sent out and asked for applicants, and we ended up getting I think 12 applicants to apply. By contrast, when Baton Rouge, I think it was, did theirs, it was almost 30 that applied. Of the 12, there was, I think, 4 or 5 that chose not to sit for the exam. Of those, or chose not to actually fill out the application. Then we schedule a test for them. They all have to take a civil service exam, and only 6 took the test. And so for a community the size of Lafayette, to only have 6 candidates sitting for the exam to be the chief of police for what is effectively the 3rd or 4th largest police force in the state of Louisiana is really something that aggravates me. But nonetheless, the Civil Service Board makes that determination. And so where it stands right now is the 6 that took the test have all passed. So they all passed the exams, so the scores have been certified, and so the interview process is now going to start for those 6. And so that'll happen probably over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks, where we've had a chance to interview them all, do all the background checks and prepare the files. And hopefully I will be able to select the chief before the end of October, which means that we have a fiscal year, so our year starts November 1st. So that way the chief would be starting November 1st, the start of the new fiscal year. So that's kind of the goal. I know I probably told you more about the process, but I'm still aggravated by it. So when I started talking about it, I kept going. But I still would like to see it changed. And, that's going to be up to who's on the Civil Service Board. And, it's not required of any other elected position, appointed position, and it just seems patently unfair to me to eliminate some really good candidates to apply for the job. Reggie, who's done a phenomenal job for me, has, I think, 69 or 70 hours, more than you need even for the majors. He ended up dropping out of school in order for his wife to go back to law school, and he was raising the kids. And so she's now a lawyer here in town. And so he has 70 hours. He's been with the force for 20-something years. He was one of the top detectives that Lafayette City Police has ever seen. He's just a fantastic officer, and he's been a great chief. And the fact that he can't even apply for the position is what bothers me so much. Baton Rouge has already called for him to go apply for that job. He's getting calls from all over the country because he's done such a good job. And he can apply everywhere, but he can't apply here. So if I seem aggravated, it's because I am. But I'll change the subject. So one of the other initiatives that Carol brought up was the transitioning over to the no-kill shelter for our animal control center. I don't judge myself by social media, but I was more popular on Facebook when I announced that initiative than in anything else that I've ever said. I mean, I think that night when I said, look, we're going to try to get to what's called a no-kill status, where we adopt animals out, we work with with all the nonprofit agencies that do similar work to have them pull the animals and take them and find homes for them to try to get to that no-kill status. I think I ended up with like 6,000 likes, which my kids tell me is pretty impressive. But so I was popular for a day as it related to that. And so we've been working really hard to try to get to that status. It'll probably take us a couple of years to do it, but it's certainly achievable. And to me, I mean, Lafayette is just such a pet-friendly, animal-friendly, whether it's your hunting dog or whether it's just a family pet. We all love our animals, and so that was to me an easy thing that we could do. We just had to change some policies and actually kind of change the mindset of what the role of the Animal Control Center was. It wasn't just to receive pets and euthanize them. It's to figure out in ways that we can get them placed, and so we're doing a much better job of that already. I'm happy to report. One of the other things that I brought up that was important, I felt like, was the University Avenue Gateway Corridor. If you look at Lafayette and you either come in on Ambassador Caffrey, University, I-49, or Louisiana Avenue, that's pretty much our four gateway corridors that come into town. None of them are especially appealing, and none of them really give a visitor the perception of the type of town that I think they're coming into. You know, we really pride ourselves on our culture and our friendliness and just being a really great place to live, but we make all of our visitors drive through some parts that have been ignored for quite some time. And so in looking at the four and trying to pick which one makes the most sense as a gateway corridor that I could focus on, because there's just never enough money to spread it amongst all four, I decided on the University, if for no other reason than anytime a parent is thinking about bringing their kid to the University of Louisiana in Lafayette, in all likelihood they're going to take University Avenue. And so we ought to, at least as a college town, have the look and feel that you're entering into a college town, and a place that a parent would say, this is a place I'm going to feel comfortable leaving my child. And then for whatever visitors are coming in for the festivals and whatever else we have to offer, I wanted to at least have that one corridor that spoke to them and said who we were and what type of place they were entering. And so we just passed the budget a few weeks ago, and in there I was able to get some money in to start that revitalization process. And it won't be easy, as I found out. Number one, University Avenue is in a floodway. Of course, it was like the one street that didn't flood with the worst rainfall we ever had. So I have to go to FEMA, and as y'all can imagine, you know, they do the maps. I don't know how long and arduous of a process it's going to be to convince FEMA that that a lot of the University Avenue shouldn't be in a floodway. It's silver lining, I guess, to the flood, and the fact that it didn't flood. I kind of have the best case that I could ever make, saying I really don't think we're going to get another 1,000-year rainfall. And even with that, University Avenue held up pretty well. Now, not where the train track underpass is. That flooded out, but the corridor from Interstate 10 to the Four Corners really held up well. There really wasn't any flooding along that corridor. So I think I should be able to make the case and hopefully get FEMA to act a little bit more quickly than they typically would. And the reason that's important is because if I'm trying to attract businesses to locate on this corridor and turn it into an economic corridor, because the way to make it happen is to have businesses there that have employees, and so that you're going to end up getting a good grocery store there, because the employees, or before they leave work, are going to stop by. there's just going to create the activity that's needed to make it a vibrant corridor. But to attract the businesses, if it's in a floodway, they have to elevate it 3 feet. Now, just to let you know, that's a pod about the height of this table. And if any of you have traveled, if you look at Willow and University, one business off of University was built, and it's a pharmacy. And I can remember then that's what highlighted to me that it was in a flood zone, because I looked and I was like, what are they building there? The slab was like this high, and I'm like, they're building it up on a hill. It really seems odd, but that's the additional cost that a business has to incur to build in that area. So it's important that we either get the maps changed or get FEMA to issue. You have to go to them and they'll issue waivers and certificates if you present them with information. So that's the first step. I think that can happen. And once the business is there, I think it'll all start to work. But in order to take a first kind of baby step, I said, well, look, let's line it with sidewalks and trees, and let's make it look like we think it should look. And that's simple enough. I mean, the sidewalks and the trees from University, from I-10 to Four Corners would probably cost $600,000 or $700,000, and I put more than that in the budget. So it's doable. Until I start to get into it and I realize, well, I don't have the right-of-ways necessarily that I'm going to need. So I'm going to have to go buy some of those right-of-ways in order to do what I want to do, or I have to relocate utilities, because if there's a big utility pole and a big utility box, I have to make a decision. I go around it, which is kind of the cheaper option than trying to relocate all those utilities. But when I go around it, well, I probably don't have enough right-of-way, so I'm taking somebody's property. So I have to go negotiate that and say, hey, how much I need to buy 4 feet of property to be able to put a sidewalk in front of your house or your business. And so there's a lot of parcels of property from I-10 to Four Corners. And so we're in the process. We've identified all the parcels. We have identified all the owners. We know what the values have been assessed at. And so now it's just kind of a matter of mapping out where the sidewalks, where I have right-of-ways and where the sidewalks can go, and where I may need to acquire some of the right-of-ways. And so, but that task of acquiring right-of-ways or relocating utilities or a combination of all of that, that's probably going to cost more than the sidewalks and the trees. And so, fortunately, I put enough in the budget, to be able to handle that. We have over a couple million in there. So I'm hopeful that there's enough to do the things that I want to do to get it started and get the project kicked off. And so, so hopefully that'll be moving along at a much faster clip now that we have the information that we need to have. That we needed to have to identify the kind of the path of the sidewalks and the trees and those types of things. How am I doing on time, Carol?
You're good.
I'm still good?
Yeah.
All right. So I-49 is a big issue. I don't know how familiar everyone is with I-49, but they're talking about the connector that's going through, and that in 2003, the feds and the states gave us approval. You'll hear it referred to as a ROD, which is just a record of decision, which is the official verdict of, all right, here you go. You got your ROD, you can proceed. And then it sat on someone's desk since 2003. And so now it's 2016, and the state comes to us and says, okay, we're ready to build the connector. And so we go and we dust off the ROD and say, there's some things that have changed, since 2003. First and foremost, Freetown, Puerto Rico wasn't a historical district back in 2003. It happened after. So, and then we look at it and we're like, well, this is kind of a connector that's very similar to the Evangeline Thruway in that it's just, barely elevated and straight across. And we don't really want another Evangeline Thruway because that's just a divide of the city. So that coupled with, you know, a few other things, we were like, well, we really do need to revisit it. You have these huge cloverleaf ramps that come off of it. So it's 500 feet wide instead of just slip ramps off and on. So we started the conversations, actually before I took office, those conversations were started to say, look, can we shrink up the footprint? Can we put slip ramps off and on? Can we elevate it higher? Can we space the road so there's light underneath, which is going to allow us to do a lot more really cool things, whether it be water structures, whether it be, you know, nature trails, whatever it is, can we do those changes? And so the state actually was really pretty good about it. The feds were even better about it to say, hey, we want this connector to be the national model. We don't want to build it like we've always built it. We don't want it to look like Claiborne Avenue in New Orleans and the underneath. We want to do it different. So come to us with your ideas. And so, you know, be careful what you wish for, because Lord, we came with 19 different versions of what could happen. And all kind of varieties, from a tunnel that had land over it so we could still develop it, to signature bridges through so it would, you know, kind of identify the city like St. Louis has the arcs. I mean, it was, you know, all kinds of choices. And it was at that point, as those conversations were being had, that the feds said, you know what, if you go higher than what we originally had in the ROD from 2003, there's an environmental impact. Sometimes it's noisier, sometimes it's less noisy. When it's split apart like that, you know, there's more light, so that's actually less environmental impact than when it's closed together. But the slip ramps are to your benefit, but the new historical district now that we're going through wasn't contemplated in the ROD. And the truth is, no matter what we do, someone is not going to like it, just like in 2003, and someone is going to sue and say, you didn't do this, you didn't contemplate the new historical, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So knowing that that was going to happen, we wanted to make sure that all our T's were crossed and I's dotted, and that we looked at the environmental impact, we looked at the contaminated part where the train depot was, and so that we relook at all of that. In order to do that, the feds decided we need to do what's called a supplemental environmental impact. So what that effectively did was say, hey, we're going to take off about a year to 18 months, and we're going to relook at all the environmental components of this new connector, with the smaller slip ramps, but with the higher, or with the cut and cover, contemplating the new historical district and taking into account all of those things, and we'll issue a new environmental impact statement, which will then make it an amended record of decision, or an amended ROD. So although it postpones the process by about a year to 18 months, ultimately, knowing that there will be suits filed, I think it's important that we did it so that we're doing it right, so that if it is challenged, we at least have the best chance to get the connector done in a way that the majority of the community feels like it should be done, but also one that would stand up to whatever challenges are done from a litigation standpoint. So that's kind of where I-49 is. So right now they're going back in and doing the environmental impact studies to contemplate all these additional areas. Let's see, the thruway, the animal control, the corridor, the police chief, the flood. The budget's terrible. It looks like it's getting worse. You know, the city actually is not too bad, considering the economy with the oil and gas and the number of layoffs, and everybody's familiar with that. The city of Lafayette has managed to decrease on a very gradual, you know, in that 4% range. You know, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 3.5, but it's been a very gradual decline. Certainly something that's manageable, you know, to where we can go in and we can make, you know, targeted cuts, and the city will be okay. The parish, on the other hand, is seeing drops of 20 and 30%. So it's you know, it's to the point where it's almost unmanageable, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And when I say the parish, it's important to remember, when I talk about the parish, you've got the city of Lafayette, and then you have all the other little municipalities, right? You've got the Broussard, Youngsville, Scott, Dusson, Karen Crow, those municipalities, and then everything else is the parish. It's the unincorporated, meaning they're not incorporated in one of those 5 communities of the city of Lafayette. They're left unincorporated. So that's the parish, and we do a budget for the parish, and we do a budget for the city of Lafayette. The other municipalities do their own budgets. So the parish budget is suffering more from the economy than any one of the other municipalities, certainly more than the city of Lafayette. And there's a couple of reasons for that. As you might imagine, as soon as there's a development going on somewhere in the parish, right? And it's a great development, and people go and move there, and so when people move there, business is open, and it's taken off. Well, what happens? Us, or Youngsville, or Scott, somebody goes and we're like, hey, we're going to annex you in. Because there's money. There's good property values, there's good sales tax dollars. Come on in. You know, Lafayette will make its pitch and say you get LUS, you'll get low water rates, it'll all be good, you'll get fiber, and you know, and then Youngsville will make its pitch, hey, you know, don't you want to be part of our community? So depending on where they're located, we get annexed. Well, what does that do? So, okay, well that takes a prime piece of revenue out of the parish. And that's happened continually over time. And really, if we project out into eternity, at some point, really most of the parish will be incorporated into somewhere. You know, we'll have all annexed it, and the parish won't even have a budget. Which you could say, well, that solves the problem then. You know, you don't have a budget, you don't have expenses. There's no reason to have parish government, except that the law at the state level says that your court system, your district court system, is funded by parish government. Your DA's office is funded through parish government. And there's these mandated expenses that are funded by parish government, and parish revenue is doing this. And so at some point in the parks and recreation and all kinds of things are funded through the parish fund, and it's heading the wrong direction because of the economy. Forget about the annexation. The economy is heading in the wrong direction. And so we then have to prepare a budget for next year where we're just guessing, is it going to continue at 25% decline? Or is it going to flatten out, and so whatever money we had for this year that we're currently in, we're going to budget that exact same amount and say, well, it's not going to get better, but hopefully it's not going to get worse? Or, you know, or somewhere in between. We're certainly not going to do a budget saying, oh, I think it's going to get better, because every economist says it's not. So it'd be kind of hard to defend that. We prepared a flat budget and said that we think that there'll still be some declines, but you know, this past year had oil at $28 for a while, and it's been more consistent in the 40s. So we're hopeful that it'll stay more in the 40s. So it shouldn't be better, but I don't think we'll go to 28. But we're going to just say it's going to stay about the same. We also knew it was an assessment year, so we knew that the Conrad was going to go in and reassess, and he really didn't reassess 4 years ago, which meant there was really kind of an 8-year assessment that was happening. So he said, well, we'll probably pick up some more property taxes in the parish budget. We'll lose some sales taxes, but it'll probably be about a wash. And that was our justification to say, I don't want to say it's going to decrease. I'm definitely not saying it's going to increase. So we just did a flat budget year. And we may be wrong either way. It may be a little bit better than what we budgeted. It may be worse. But again, if it's worse, we're then cutting services like to the court system, to the DAs, to the Parks and Recreation, to the volunteer firefighter departments, all of these critical needs that exist that the parish is required to pay for. And so it's not an easy budget to manage, but we're going to have to figure out a solution. I don't have one just yet, but I'm working with the DA. We're going to be working with the judges to try to figure out something. It's hard to go to the taxpayers and have this kind of conversation and say, look, at some point, the law requires us to fund it, and so we're going to need, a millage, or we're going to need something to fund the DA and the criminal court system. Other municipalities, other areas have that millage that's dedicated specifically for that. Lafayette doesn't have that at all. Is it a trade for getting rid of some sales taxes to get a millage in place? Because at least with the millage, it's a number that is going to come in based on the values at least for 4 years. Because those assessments are set, and you have 4 years of budgeting that you can do pretty accurately. With that, I guess it's probably time to turn it over to questions. Mr. Flynn, I think, had the first question. He called it from the beginning. Before the prayer even, I think you said yes.
I think I have a few. Okay, and you've answered some of them, but I'll go through this. What financial impact has the flooding had on the city and the parish budget that you've had to deal with?
Okay. So mostly as it relates to property taxes, right? So I just told you, well, we looked at the parish and we said the sales taxes are going to be going down, but people's values have gone up, so we should be in pretty good shape. Well, what happened was a lot of people got flooded out. So the timing of it was at the exact same time that Conrad had gone in and said your house was worth $100,000. I've looked at it now and I think it's worth $150,000. So as a government, we were going to realize some additional revenue from that. And then the flood hit while people are just getting those things in the mail within a couple of weeks of time and saying, it's not worth 150, it's not even worth 100 because it's gutted. It's just 2x4s. I don't even have sheetrock up. So it's not worth the 100. So Conrad has to go in and make those adjustments down to come up to something that's reasonable to him. And it still may not be reasonable to the homeowner because they may say, well, it's worth 0. You can't live in it like it is and that kind of thing. But to answer your question, that's the biggest impact on the budget, both city and parish. I built in that budget back in June and July is when we finished the budget. And so, we contemplated whatever the property value taxes were going to be, the flood's hitting, so that means the city's going to miss out on a significant amount of revenue there. The parish, and the city can handle it. The parish, however, is going to miss out on a significant amount of property tax dollars that we had programmed in. And so our budget probably is a little optimistic because we were contemplating that and certainly weren't contemplating the effects of the flood. That's the biggest thing. Now, in Youngsville, they're probably realizing some sales tax decreases also, just because so many businesses were affected and then people maybe even just shut their business down so they could go work on their homes for a few days, and so there may be some sales tax dollars. But we're not in the position like Denham Springs was, where 70% of every home and business was shut down. So they don't even have, we're actually going to, once the rebuilding starts, we're going to have Doug Ashley and Stein and Lowe's and Home Depot. We're going to see a little uptick in sales taxes from a government standpoint because all of those dollars are going to be spent, whether it's FEMA money, whether it's SBA loans, whether it's the federal government that gave us money. All of that rebuilding effort will see an uptick for us. But like Denham Springs, none of those stores are even open. So they're going to have to go and buy their stuff somewhere else, which will help probably Baton Rouge. But Denham Springs is in the most difficult position of any municipality in the state because literally 70% of their sales tax, of their revenue base, sales and property tax, was affected by the flood. Tough spot, really tough for those guys.
Thank you, Joel. The last year about this time, you and Dee Stanley came over and made your pitch why you should be elected city parish president, and I think both candidates said that they were in favor of the I-49 corridor. And since that time, Harold Shuffler and very concerned citizens from the environmental community have come forth, and they've set out propositions that that are very concerned about contamination possibly of the Chico aquifer, and also even if it didn't affect the Chico aquifer, that there could be drain off or the flow of the water to the Vermilion, and the communities down the road would be faced with contamination. What assurance can you give us that those issues will be addressed in the design and even before the construction phase of I-49?
Your timing on that question is really good. We had a meeting, I had a private meeting with the Department of Transportation earlier today, and then we had a meeting at lunch with the Evangeline through a redevelopment team where the state was there, and they spoke a little bit about it. One of the next steps of this supplemental environmental impact, and one of the more important steps that we impressed upon the DEQ is that, look, we need to have answers. We need to not rely on the rod that said this or that from 2003. We want you to go back in, which they've committed to do, and they're going to do a complete environmental impact on the contamination, specifically the site that I mentioned earlier, where the train depot and those things were. So they're opening that back up. They're going to do the study. It's certainly outside my area of expertise, but I do feel like with DEQ involved, and then that may not be good enough for some folks, and I understand that, though it will be looked at, it will be documented, all the test results are going to be made, we'll have public hearings on all the work that's being done. And so that's part of this supplemental environmental impact. It's not just about noise and about the location of the thing, it's also about whatever contamination sites existed, and is there a way to remediate it, or is it going to require something like a relocation? And hopefully they'll come to us with whatever the answer is.
What assurance can you give our group and to the Lafayette community that we're not going to turn out like Flint, Michigan, with reference to contaminated water?
Yeah, and you know, Flint had, there was areas that had wood pipes still, and so
yeah, they wish for wood now.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Again, I'm getting kind of outside my area of expertise. I feel really good for the city of Lafayette as it relates to LUS, because we've spent millions of dollars. Thank you, kids, for coming, by the way. Appreciate it. Thank y'all. Who's running for my job? Which one of y'all? All of y'all. That's good. That's a good election there. You got good choices. That's how it should be. So, yeah, I'm definitely outside my area of expertise as it comes to the water system, but I feel confident that, at least as it relates to LUS, we've got some experts that are looking at it. I feel like DEQ is going to come in as it relates to the connector and do their job there, but all right, you're going to be the one that's going to win. I was going to say. That's exactly right. All right, we have a winner. I almost feel like I need to resign now and just let you come on. It wasn't natural. Much more natural than I am. All right, was that... that was about as good an answer as I could give you on that.
You're going to keep our water clean, right?
Yeah, I'm going to do everything I can.
All right.
You certainly have enough of it to keep clean now.
Oh, yeah. That's not the cleanest water.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, and I'll throw in that one of the prominent economists or experts said that we hadn't seen the worst of the downturn in the oil and gas industry here in Lafayette, and our entire region probably lose another 5,000 jobs over the next year. And I was wondering if your administration has a plan in place if there is an economic downturn to maintain the city revenues, and at what level will those revenues be maintained, and how will they be financed, in property tax or sales tax?
Well, first, I hope the economist is wrong, but, and sometimes they are, but we kind of have to operate with the information that's given to us, because I'm not, you know, an endowed professor at LSU economist, and so if he says we potentially could lose 5,000 more jobs, then that's something we have to contemplate. I will say, and I don't get to take any credit for it, prior to me coming into office, Joey really did, with his CFO, Lori Toops, who I retained, they really did a good job the last 4 years of building up the reserve funds and not making all of the revenue part of the budget. I'm gonna be close in my years here, but don't hold me to being exact. But there was a time where our reserve funds had shrunk to about $9 million, which is not even remotely fiscally responsible for a community that has revenues of 300 and something million. Since that time, Joey and Dee and Lori Toops focused on building up that reserve fund to the point where it should be. And I inherited it right at $32 million. We've got it up to $37 million with some cuts that we made this budget year that we're going to be starting November 1st. So I plan to continue the last 4 years of efforts. The whole point of having that is so that if there is a reduction of $2 million of revenue, that I at least have a choice. I can look to cut, I can look to take it from the reserve funds, or I can look to do a combination of both. And so, by contrast, the parish budget has a reserve fund of $60,000. So that's kind of a made-up number, because when you get to a budget of 12 or 14 million, I mean, 60,000, that's just accounting. We're guessing, it's a budget, so it might be a negative 60, it might be a 120, who knows what it is, but it's basically that we don't have any. That's a much bigger concern for us, especially if the economy continues to head in the direction that the economist said. Factored in with the property taxes from the flood, in all likelihood, the budget that we prepared is going to have to be revisited fairly soon after the start of the year, November, December, January. That's kind of the first 3 months of the year. And the law requires, which is a good thing, the law requires that if any of our projections are off by, I forget what it is, 5% or 8%, some number, then we need to go in and make an adjustment. So for instance, this past year, I don't know if y'all know about the big fight with the DA and the budget and those things, we were faced with having to go in and make an amendment to the budget. And so we had to look as to where we would cut, and one of the places we cut, we included was the DAs and the judges. They would make the argument that, you're legally responsible to fund us at a reasonable amount, and we argued, well, it's still a reasonable amount. I mean, it doesn't mean you're immune from cuts. I mean, we think we're still giving you enough money, and a reasonable. It's not as much as you want. It's not as much actually as we want to give you, but it's reasonable, and you can still run your office and do the duties. But if this happens, we're going to look at parks. We're going to look at everything that's in that parish budget again, and we cut volunteer firefighters. I mean, look, I made a lot of enemies this first budget that I'm preparing, just because of the parish budget. You just have to make these decisions. The money's not there, so I tried to trim it to where everyone took a little bit of it. No one took the brunt of it, and some more than others, and I get that, and they may be more mad at me than the others, but everybody's mad. And so we may be doing it again, I guess is the point, and that we have to do it. I mean, if the money's not there, then we have to make the cuts, and because there is no reserve fund.
Thank you. Does your administration have any plans in expanding the LUS fiber network to unincorporated areas of the parish or the municipalities in Lafayette Parish?
probably the best way to answer it is to say that I am not opposed to expanding it. But being a CPA nerd, you know, whatever we do, it's going to be because I think it makes fiscal sense to do it. If we're going to expand and we can do that, and it's going to make the fiber more money, well then I'm all for it. If I've got to go spend a bunch of capital in order for that to happen, well, that changes the analysis. But if it still shows that, hey, you go spend another $6 million to expand it out and you're going to make $10 million, then I'll probably be okay to do it. I don't have, and one of the things that, you know, was very important to me is I don't have animosity towards the rest of the parish. I didn't come in with some built-in resentments about who stole water or who, you know, whatever fights had been had, those are fights that have been had. I'm going in, we're all Lafayette Parish, and sometimes it is a difficult position because what's good for the city of Lafayette, because I'm the mayor, and what's good for the parish of Lafayette as the parish president, don't always agree. And so, you know, I can sit here and argue with myself of, well, this is better for the city and this is better for the parish. And that's the toughest part of the job. But as it relates to the fiber, if it makes financial sense, and the, you know, the people want it, then yeah, I don't have a problem expanding out. I'm not going to let the other politics kind of get involved.
Here's my last question. Does Lafayette need more bike paths? Why or why not?
Oh, that is a good question.
That's a cruel question.
That is a cruel question. I'm gonna give you the internal arguments that happened at City Hall, because we've got the proponents, without question, and there's a lot of reasons for that type of pedestrian-friendly community. And then there's me that says, okay, but it's got to be done smartly. And so the arguments that we have inside of City Hall is I say things like, well, when we're building the Costco development and we're putting a new major road behind the development with a light off of Collie Saloon that's going to connect to where Lourdes Hospital is on Frembustani, and actually ultimately is going to connect the other side where the Pizza Village and the walk-ons, that's going to continue all the way to Settlers Trace. When we're building new, really great corridors in this community, well, why wouldn't we put the bike path on? That's where it should be. Because now I'm connecting the neighborhoods behind Como with River Ranch and with all that retail. And then no one's going to argue because no one's changing their driving habits because the road didn't exist. It's like this is part of the roads. And so when we're doing all of these new corridors to connect the city, it would make sense to incorporate. When you slap them on a place like West Bayou Parkway, that people have traveled for 50-something years and gotten accustomed to me it becomes a safety issue. And I don't know if it makes sense. And we fight about it inside City Hall. And I've been asked to weigh in, and ultimately I'm going to have to make a decision on West Bayou. If for no other reason than the residents are going to come and burn City Hall down if I don't. They want to know one way or the other. Are you keeping it or are you going to get rid of it? And so West Bayou's kind of become this litmus test of whether you're a proponent of bike paths. And I like to say, I am a proponent of it. I think it makes sense. When we build Frembustani out towards St. Thomas More and that new development that's going out, going to be parallel with Collie Saloon, we should connect everybody in every way possible. Walking paths, bike paths, you know, a car, everything. But going into existing roadways is where I kind of have the problem.
I live on Bottom Street. I've seen bicycles.
Larry, you need to come up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know if I answered the question, but that's kind of where I am with the bike paths. And that's not to say that some existing roads don't make sense. but, you know, West Bayou's kind of one.
Let me
I moved
follow
here in
up.
1978 and West Bayou was.
But they're fussing everybody to have to come to the mic, so.
Yes. Let me just follow up. On Johnston Street, there's talk of maybe 1 lane or 2 lanes or whatever. Would that encompass consideration of a bike path?
Okay, the Johnston Street, well, you know, the bike lanes have been on Johnston. Why anybody would ride on Johnston, I have no idea, but those have been on for a long time. What they're talking about doing as it relates to Johnston Street from the coulee at Cajun Dome Boulevard, basically, to the coulee at the horse farm, you know, right before the theater. It's still going to retain, it's still going to be 2 lanes both ways. They're talking about putting in some areas where there's boulevards and burying some power lines and making it, you know, more of what they call, the catchphrase is a complete street now, to where it, I think the goal, and this was, you know, the ball was in motion long before I took office, but I don't say I disagree with it. I think the goal is when we bury those power lines and change the look of Johnson Street, that the folks that live in this community are going to say, okay, I think I'd like more of Johnson Street to look like this than what it currently looks like. Now, they'll be making that statement with the information of, is traffic worse? And if it is, they may say, well, I do like the look, but the traffic's worse. So, you know, but that'll give us the information we need to say, do we want to continue this all the way out to Ambassador Caffrey? How much does it cost to bury the lines there? But the state has stepped up and said, we will pay for this because we think this is what direction you need to go on Johnson, and it's a state highway. And so the decision was made to say, yes, let's do it. It'll be a good footprint for us to then judge, do we want more of it, or is this just going to be the piece that we don't like going forward? Thank you.
I should say, thank you. I have one other point to make and one other question to ask, and it involves the future of Lafayette in terms of traffic. I think if you look around or you drive through it like I do, because I always get up late and I always end up in my Jeep at rush hour, it's really important to notice that you're absorbing and sucking up what EPA says is dangerous levels of CO2 and CO, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. There has to come a time, sooner or later, when we reach a gridlock or people will become noticeably affected by this. One of the real problems with air and water pollution and petrochemical infiltration is that you don't see immediate results often enough, that over time you get cumulative damage. So here's what I suggest for Lafayette, in all sincerity. We know that it took 20 or 30 years to get the Camellia crossing, to get the Camellia Bridge and all that, and how difficult the process that was for everyone concerned. So if we're going to help, we know now that that helped a bit, unless you're in the rush hour on Caliste. But it's only going to get worse. You can build all the roads you want now in Lafayette, and what's going to happen is, has been proven time and time again nationally, is that you just get more traffic. If you build it, they will come. What I'm going to suggest tonight is that we start immediately before the bad effects of whatever begins to, and one of the bad effects being if industry's going to come here, how are their kids going to get to school? How am I going to get to work? Blah, blah, blah. To make this a community more attractive, I suggest 2 things. One, you delay the city acquisition of sidewalk space on the north entrance to town until after the DEQ investigation. And let's remember that the DEQ is the same DEQ that follows the directives from the legislature regarding examining oil spills all over the marsh and pipeline leaks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the same DEQ. So we will be watching. And the second thing I think is very important, that we start looking forward to a very attractive public transportation methods and means. That's the only way we're going to solve, I think, in my view, and I believe I'd be borne out by the facts. That's the only way we're going to solve our traffic problems. I wonder what you think about that, and if maybe we could use some of the revenues from LUS to help with that. I don't know about that, but what do you think about public transportation?
I'm all for public transportation. I do think that it could solve a lot of the issues. In fact, we've got our regional metropolitan planning organization is starting to provide Greyhound bus services from Opelousas into Lafayette, from the Rain area into Lafayette onto to St. Martin Parish. And now they're looking at trying to maybe do something on the railways to accomplish the same thing, to have, you know, kind of the park and rides out there, because there is a huge amount of traffic that comes in to work in Lafayette. And ultimately we'd like to expand it all the way to the port down in Iberia Parish and utilize that for the commuters. As it relates to within the city, I have given thought to what can we do, and it's just, to me, and I could be totally wrong here, it's almost a mindset. I mean, there's still this mindset of public transportation is something that other people do because they have to do it. There's nothing about public transportation that the citizens of Lafayette seem to embrace. And it's like, yeah, I'll hop on the bus. I mean, why wouldn't I? For whatever reason, our mindset hasn't gotten there yet. One of the thoughts and the discussions that we've been having is, what can we do to connect downtown with the university in a way that it's not currently connected? And so we've looked at everything from, they have like little electric buses, for lack of a better word. They're shaped more like the old Volkswagen vans, and they're run on electricity, and you can hook a couple of them together. And for lack of a better word, just to make it kind of cool or less, you know, stigmatized than hopping on the big old city bus and going, just to start to change the mindset, and so that we're getting the college age people to say, man, that's a lot easier. And it could be a trolley if it's a trolley, but just to start having the trolley pass, the electric cart pass, that the students know, here's the schedule, here's where it's run, I have a break in my schedule, rather than go all the way to the parking lot, I can just hop on the trolley, it'll take me to where I want to go grab lunch. And those kinds of things could probably have a longer term positive impact, because those folks are then going to see the benefit of the trolleys, and we'll start demanding that the route gets expanded and expanded and expanded. And at some point, you would like for your, you know, families in the Como area, behind Como, if their kids want Borden's ice cream, that they don't have to hop in the car to go get it. They're like, no, well, the transportation, public transportation is swinging by, you know, in another 10 minutes, let's hop on the trolley, go to Borden's, and then we'll, after we eat, we'll hop on and come back. But it's going to take a fundamental shift in attitudes, and I don't know how to accomplish it, and that's why we're kind of focusing on university and downtown, because then we're starting with a group that maybe when they're our age, they will have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and they'll be much more receptive to doing it. So that's something we've been talking about.
That's a very astute answer. I take the same position in terms of overcoming the stigma of public transportation. And I agree that is the problem, other than the heavy traffic. But thank you. It's a pleasure to know that at least there's some interest in that direction. And I would like to say that I think it may be worth the thought of establishing a blue ribbon committee to study the issue in detail, rather than burdening some of the overstressed offices as it is. Thank you.
I go to change from transportation to drainage. It's a brief presentation here of pictures that the city of Lafayette provide for me. Because of this treatment underground that was a pleader of 10 years, was performed a few years ago, saved my subdivision, 78 houses. I live in this area. It's a block with 72 houses drain on me and was blocked. And always we had water at the entrance. My subdivision is between Channel 10 and Lafayette High School. It was incredible. I waited 10 years. In fact, the head of the drainage passed away June the 22nd. I visited his wife. I was told to keep it quiet because it was so much need in Lafayette. And I thank the city, you know, because I'm just here with a positive. You can see the incredible. They said it's a mixture between fiberglass and cement. Was injected, was done very early in the morning. I took responsibility because there was no way to have it approved with my neighbors. It was done all the way here. You can see the trucks. And it's injected from the 6th house, is the block I live in the center. Everything was sinking, was not drainage. We passed this flooding, my subdivision will not be here. Now the neighbors know, and you can see when the treatment is done, it's from this corner, the trucks, a big compressor, I don't know what they do, like roller, and was going. That way the water will drain 72 houses, will go in front of my street, go to the cooling in and to the river. But mainly I'm here, something different, and not to complain. This is my opportunity to thank you, you know. And like that is the way I took it, and the councilman at the time was helping so much, and be connected. But thank you very much, and it was a great opportunity to be here. Thank you.
I'll take full credit.
You did a good job.
You have a question?
I just had a quick question,
Oh, come on up.
very quick. I go to City Hall and pay my utilities every month. Y'all have a really nice drive-through where I can just zip through there. And now you're closing it, you're gonna be closing it, right? That's what I've been told. And you're moving to Moss. Now I wanna know why, if we already have this nice place, why are we moving? Because I know that's costing a lot of money to move to Moss. Can you answer that for me?
Yeah, again, I take credit for the drainage, and I inherit the relocation of the utilities. So that's just the way it works. The demand, you know, LUS knows who utilizes the current system at City Hall because they have the addresses, and so their analysis showed that the majority of folks that were utilizing City Hall, and the parking, as you know, if you've gone, is pretty awful. Now the drive-through.
Well, I just drive through.
And the drive-through backs up on the St. Landry. And so they felt like the majority of customers were coming from the 701 zip code. And so the decision was made to build that facility. Subsequent to that decision being made is when I came into office, but more importantly, I think it was Pat Lewis came in, and he mandated that we not close the City Hall office because there was a bunch of his constituents that lived in 06 and in his district that utilized City Hall. And so now we're going to have the full service one at Moss Street. And those individuals for the last, I don't know how many years, drove all the way into City Hall and to pay their bills. Now they'll have the facility near them. The City Hall facility is going to stay open. It will not be as fully functional as it was before, but you will still have the ability to pay at City Hall. And so that's kind of I don't know the why, other than, you know, what I inherited, where they said they looked at the customer base based on who was going, and the vast majority
Will the
came from.
drive-through be open?
Well, I'm almost embarrassed to not know the answer, but I really don't know. I know it's staying open.
They told me today, I drive through too, they said the customer service is not open, but the drive-through is open, but they said they were gonna stop it soon.
They're gonna, well, one of them's staying open, and I'll find out and what I'll do is I'll email Carol, and he can let you guys know.
Drive-through.
Yeah.
If they close it, there'll be a lot of space for offices there.
Well, the rumor.
If they close the indoor, and that's if they keep in the drive-through, but if they close the drive-through and keep the indoor
Yeah, the
one.
customer
then it'll
service
still
is
be-
closed.
I'll find out.
The rumor that it's gonna be just for bicycles and roller skates is not true.
That is not true.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming by and answering all our
Thank
questions.
y'all. Appreciate it. No, I think everybody's ready to go.
I think they're ready, I think we're ready.
Thank
to go.
y'all, I
You did a good
appreciate it.
job.
I appreciate it.
Before everyone leaves, I just want to, 2 weeks from now, the 17th, we have a gentleman by the name of Larry Rader, and he'll be our guest speaker. He's running for the District 3, that's in this whole district of Buchanan. Anyhow, thank y'all very much for being here.